When you're trying to do coding, you don't get very accurate results by just pitching the question against an LLM.
How does all of this normalization, structuring, et cetera, start to impact the way you and IMO Health think about AI and the next generation of AI? Like how, because there's so much excitement about, large language models and Gen AI and all the rest. And you say, well, why do we need these code sets anymore if they can read it just the way a human being could read it? So help us debunk this concept.
That's right. So I think the first concept is, when LLMs came out, that was one of the questions. Like I can just throw an LLM at this, right? So think about, let's just, we all know this, but I think it's good to reinforce this is, how were LLMs, large language models, really created? The foundational models that you and I use, for other purposes beyond healthcare, they were trained on a corpus of data that was scraped from the internet. It has an expiry date. It has a stop date in the sense that they're trained up to a certain point and it has a stop date. There are specialized domain-specific models out there for chemistry and biology. And also, there are medical LLMs that are emerging, but these foundational LLMs out there, from various companies were not really meant to solve highly complex sort of medical semantic sort of problems out there. So it's there. So if you try to code something to ICD-10, it'll give you an answer. Now you have to check whether it's hallucinating or not. That's another problem because it is a byproduct of using LLMs. But it is also does not have a textbook. When you ask it a question, it's not part of its training corpus to be able to do that. Now, one can make an argument that, hey, you could have medical specific LLMs in the future, and that's certainly true. That could happen in the future. But today, I'm talking about the current state of things. You don't get good results, especially when you're trying to do map to a complete and accurate code. When you're trying to do coding, you don't get very accurate results by just pitching the question against an LLM. But LLMs can help. How can they? The way they help and way IMO Health, companies like IMO Health, become relevant in this space is that we have a set of proprietary data assets. So our editorial policy, for example. Think about our content. When I say content, the building block, the neuron, if neuron is a building block of a nervous system, our building block is the medical concept. And around that concept is all the synonymy, different ways a doctor can actually define that concept. Then that medical concept could be a compound concept like the one I mentioned, malignant neoplasm of the lung with metastasized to pelvis, or it could be so that it needs to be completely and accurately coded. Multiple ICD codes, multiple SOMED codes, primary, secondary codes, all that complexity of it, right? So now we have that content, we have the way we code, that means our editorial policy that we've kind of fashioned over 30 years, and that becomes essential context. So now if you take an LLM, ask it a well-formed question in terms of a prompt, give it context, right? That means the benefit of IMO's content and other kind of assets like editorial policies, and then ask a question of an LLM, you are going to get a vastly more accurate answer and reduce the probability, not zero, but reduce the probability of it hallucinating. So how do the way we stay relevant? So number one, we are still relevant. These code sets are still relevant because even with an LLM, the mechanics of reimbursement or clinical coding is not going to go away, right? I don't see that going away. And also the way IMO Health, companies like IMO Health stay relevant is because they have these assets within the four walls of their company, which is their IP, that can inform an LLM to give you a better answer. So that's the way that's the way I'm staying relevant in the marketplace. And that's the way we are seeing way we deploy LLMs to things like LLMs to aid within our customer base.
Do you see opportunities to actually leverage this Gen AI on the creation side? So as you think about creating ontology, I was just thinking of one of the things that I always think about is, what are the functions, right, that a machine could perform, right, versus what are the functions that you must have a human to perform. So as you talked about your organization and actually the creation of the content, which is your IP,
Yeah.
Do you see an emerging role where AI is actually going to get involved in the content creation?
It can, especially how do you represent that content is most interesting to me, right? I mean, I could have it as a relational database. There's no doubt. I could have it in other forms, but increasingly, I've been reading and learning. In the process of learning about AI is how you can you represent this in the form of a graph in terms of a knowledge graph. That's very powerful because if I think of myself as a patient, and that's where most of the time it's like I am a patient. What defines me as a person, as a patient, is that all the connections I have connections to my hospital, to my doctor's office, to my radiology office, to the lab I go to the physical therapist I go to, maybe a chiropractor I go to. I'm just not my diagnoses. I'm my labs. I'm my images. So you can think of yourself as a node within that graph, and all the spikes, all the everything radiating out of it, and the relationships I have with these other things. Content can also be represented that way, and it is powerful in being able. There's a problem or a diagnosis. Can it be linked to a set of labs? Can it be linked to a certain set of medications? Can it be linked to a certain set of procedures? Absolutely, it can. So you have to think of content as the interconnected set of things, and how you represent it maybe could be in the form of a graph, right? And the creation of the graph itself, which is, and if you say I have a content and I'll give it to you in the form of a knowledge graph, I'll make it available to you. That creation of the knowledge graph itself can be expedited massively by use of large language models itself. The second scenario is, we help a lot of our customers migrate dictionaries in their EHRs, right? You have a procedure dictionary, you have a surgical dictionary. We could use LLMs there. In the past, it would be a manual process. Like you would sit a person, qualified terminologist there, and they would map it to law inc or what, and then the dictionary would go back fully nicely mapped. But that needs to be maintained over time because those things go old, go stale, as you know. So I see LLMs also stepping in, especially maybe an agent. A concept of an agent can be employed here. A terminologist agent could probably do a lot of the work now at a high level of accuracy, and then have a human sort of in the loop, not as many maybe, but not as many hours maybe, but have a human in the loop look through the low confidence matches to be able to say, I'll do the exception handling. I'll do the things that are unsolvable, and let the 80% or the 90% be done by the LLMs or an agent as a terminology agent. So those are the two examples I can think of off the top of my head.